In this video we'll be looking at how to set up a basic document scanner, including how to configure a scanner that contains Kofax virtual rescan technology. Now some scanners will come with Twain drivers or ISIS drivers, and they also may come with a version of Kofax VRS. We always recommend that you use the VRS version that comes with your scanner unless you've purchased a full license from Kofax. And we always recommend that you use the ISIS drivers over the Twain drivers. Now we suspect that you would have already installed your scanner first, including if it came with VRS, you would have installed the VRS. So what we do is to configure the scanner, we need to activate the scanner configuration utility, which is under the Kofax program settings. What you'll see when you open up the scanner configuration utility is you will see any currently configured scanners. Now you may have purchased a new scanner and need to update, or you need to reconfirm which scanner you're using. If you tick the VRS certified scanners, that will show everything that Kofax has supplied as far as its own internal drivers for virtual rescan and the actual scanners that it's certified to run. You'll find that if you have a particular scanner and it's in the list and you've got a Canon scanner, you can select the scanner, you can click configure sources, you can say create a standard set of sources, and by default it populates all the different options of scanning. So the drivers you can use is with VRS or software VRS, ISIS scanning with image processing, ISIS scanning without software VRS, and ISIS scanning with image processing. And the default we use for scanners that do not come with VRS is that we choose the without software VRS, but with AIPE. And AIPE is the engine that Kofax uses to do image cleanups. What I'm doing here is just basically showing that you can actually create your own, and this is what's behind it. So if you created a scanner source and you chose that you'd like to have your scanner with software VRS and image processing, without image processing, you can choose the different types of modes. In this particular case, the Canon come with ISIS drivers. There are some scanners that'll come with Twain drivers and the interface will look slightly different. Most of these options we leave as default when we're creating a scanner. But as you'll see, there's no real need to create your own source, because by creating the standard sources it gives you all the options available. Once you've chosen the source, you set it as the default, and that means that every time you fire up your batch manager and create a new job and attempt to scan, it will load those scanner drivers. If you find that you don't have VRS based scanners, you didn't get an OEM version, then if you've already installed your scanner, which you should have done in the first place, then what you need to do is you can then search for the scanner that's been installed, or you can actually click on the box scanner with configured sources. If you do tick that box, it will actually load up any scanner drivers that you might have installed. In this case, my machine contains a Brother scanner. It is actually a Twain based scanner, so it's really not ideal. And I've had to configure my own sources because it really isn't a certified scanner. But for this exercise, I'm just showing you how to select a particular driver, how to select which scanning processing engines we want to use, and allow you to create your own if you find that yours not on the list. Of course, it's always beneficial to use scanners that are certified by Kofax so that you can get the maximum out of your document scanner. You'll notice that the Twain interface checkbox is available, and that's because this particular scanner only came with Twain drivers. And the Twain interface basically means is that if you've chosen to use a document scanner, the Twain interface will pop up and show you how to configure the different settings. Now that we've selected the scanner and the source type, we're going to fire up Batch Manager, create a batch. It'll load the document scanner that we set as the default, and then we'll need to configure the settings, things like scanning in black and white, what resolution double-sided, single-sided, and all depends on the batch class. So what you'll notice is the scan source has been set, and you'll notice a little blue icon next to it, which is the button that allows us to open the settings page. You'll also notice as a scanner profile setting is blank, and that's because we've not set the scanner up yet to scan for BAS and IAS. So you've got options like if you've got flatbeds or automatic document feeders. Our default has always been 300 dpi and black and white, and of course paper size is important. And if you've got an A3 scanner, you can change the orientation in which you put the paper in. So you might set the scanner up for A3, however you would put the A4 paper in landscape. Some batch classes will allow you to select and change it from black and white to color, but that needs to be tested. And also, depending on the batch class, it's either recommended for either single-sided or double-sided. In this case, the BASs are double-sided scanning, and you've got some options there on the interface like start and so forth. The next thing we look at is the options tab. Now these are all Kofax drivers related interface, so it's not related to the Twain or ISIS driver. This is all Kofax at this point. So these sorts of things like front picking and back picking and thresholds and front rotation and back rotations, they're all options that you can choose. If your scanner doesn't have VRS and doesn't know how to rotate the paper correctly around in case it's facing the wrong direction, you can make those changes here. Front picking and back picking we don't use. If your scanner can't remove blank pages, then you can set thresholds up here on how much blackness on a page constitutes something that's not blank, and you can also delete back pages. For BAS and IAS, we don't delete pages at all. We need to retain all pages. So depending on your batch class design, you need to go into here and configure the options according to your scanner as well. So once again, if you've got scanners that can automatically delete blanks and auto-rotate pages from left to right, or if they're upside down to rotate them facing the correct way, then you may not need to choose those. When you click the Advanced button, you will most likely get this interface, which is how to adjust the brightness and the contrast on your document. So these things you need to test, and you need to check which settings are going to be appropriate to get the optimal image. For those that have got Twain, you can enable the Twain source, which means that every time you scan, an extra window will pop up where you can continually make adjustments. I recommend that you don't enable the UIs. When you're scanning using ISIS drivers, you don't get that extra checkbox. So by all means, you can change those attributes, test them until you're satisfied with the results you're getting, so that you're getting clear images, that the image is facing the correct way. If the batch class doesn't require blank pages, then test your blank page function. So they're all the different things that you can set for. I always like to just use auto, see what the default does, and then work on it until such time as I'm satisfied that the images that I'm getting is as accurate as possible. You'll notice there's no button there called More, but for those that are using ISIS drivers, there is a More button, and that will actually open up the manufacturer's drivers where you can look inside, delve inside the UI and have a look at all the extra settings they may have. Things like blank page removal, auto cropping, auto deskewing. So you can enhance the quality by looking at the drivers. Once you've done that, you need to save those settings so that every time you start the batch up, the BAS IAS batch class, that it will retain those settings. You'll notice you didn't have to type anything. It knows that you are working on the BAS batch class. So as you can see here, I'm just creating another batch, starting the scan module up, and you'll notice that it's retained and loaded the scanner profiles BAS IAS PAYG. And that behind all of that it retained the last settings, 300, A4, black and white, duplex, and those options and so forth that I selected in this demonstration. One of the things you may not be aware of is that during your scanning process, if you find that you've got images located on your network drive, You can also change the driver to software import. And even with software import, there is a scanner settings option and a profile that you can create to support anything that you might import. So you might be bringing down documents, PDF files, things like that from your portal. Someone else might be scanning images from another type of scanner, like a multifunction device, and you need to grab those images over and above your document scanner. So you have the opportunity of changing it to software import. You get limited amount of functions that you can do, and you can then save those profiles against the scan source called software import. So as soon as you choose the software import and you hit the scan all button, it will allow you to browse your network and bring in images. And as you see, when you jump between the scan sources from software import back to your normal one, that it will continually load up the appropriate settings to match. The next thing we're going to do is look at how to configure the scanner if it has Kofax VRS, either the OEM version or if the Kofax software has the license to support virtual rescan. So I'm just going to fire up under the Kofax Capture Programs entry. I'm going to look for the scanner configuration utility, and I'm going to ensure that I select the correct scanner driver and the settings to match virtual rescan. In this case, it's going to be the software VRS. So if you click configure the sources and choose the SVRS entry with AIPE option, they're the two options we would always choose, anything that has SVRS and AIPE. Set it as default, and that'll ensure that next time I create a batch, scan a batch, that particular driver will be loaded. So let's go ahead and start a batch off. Let's create another batch class. Let's start and process the scan module. And as you'll see, an interface will pop up the first time asking us to choose what type of drivers we're using. I'm just going to click OK on that, and you'll notice it's now got both SVRS and AIPE, and there's no scanner profiles to match. I'll also notice down below VRS Elite is loaded. That's because it's recognized that you've asked for an additional piece of software, and that will have loaded up for us. So what we want to do is just have a look around at the settings and ensure that we can configure this to support black and white 300 dpi, making sure our paper size is correct for the sheets of paper we're using, and also the type of scanner that we're using. Once again, single-sided, double-sided. So the next thing we're going to do is look at the options button, and you can see front picking, back picking, all the same. The only thing that I would consider changing here would be the page timeout in seconds, so that the scanner, when it runs out of paper, doesn't sit there cycling for too long. I would probably leave the pre-cache at 1, probably drop the timing down to about 5 seconds. Everything else that we need to do is under the Advanced button, and as you'll see, now that I've clicked the Advanced button, I get a different interface. This is the Kofax Virtual Rescan software, and what it basically shows you is you have a whole range of options that appear along the top of what you can do with images that have come in. You've got a preview window that'll show you the scanned document. And the concept behind this is that if there is an issue with the scanned image, it'll pop up into this interface, and it'll allow you to dynamically make adjustments to the brightness, the contrast, cleaning up the image, despeckling, deskewing, so that you can get a perfect image without stopping the scanner and then rescanning that sheet of paper. So it'll automatically stop the scanner, pop the image up, display it to you. You can interactively work with it, close off the VRS interface, and it'll continue scanning, and it would have adjusted that image accordingly. So what we want to do here is start setting up some defaults like auto crop, auto deskew, clean up my image. If there are any folds in the corner of the document, fill it up. If there are any punch holes in it, fill it up. If the document is scanned sideways or upside down, automatically rotate it. If the batch class allows you to support deleting blank pages, select them. Make your setting adjustments, so to say, is the page really dirty and noisy? That constitutes possibly a blank page or if it's clean. If you've got hole punches in them, ignore those hole punches so that it all helps you work out and determine what constitutes a blank page. So you can just test these at any time to see what constitutes those entries. Other settings, you've got brightness and contrast. You can also set auto brightness and contrast. These are things where thresholds are set, so what constitute a document that's too bright or the contrast is too great. So you can allow the system to define it here, which will set some thresholds up, including setting up gamma, which you don't get an option to do in your document scanner normally. So VRS will allow you to adjust the gamma, which is a variation, I suppose, of the brightness and contrast. So you can use these settings to test and adjust until you're getting once again a perfect image. If you find a particular batch class requires a particular contrast setting and brightness settings because the auto doesn't do it justice, then by all means preset them here. And it will apply it to a profile and it'll allow you to maintain really high quality images. What I'm demonstrating is that blue box, which is a threshold box. And what will happen is if it exceeds those thresholds, the application will pop up the image and show you that the brightness or contrast is out of sequence. There's also some clarity options which are really good. You can play around with this and adjust them, especially the intelligent cleanup option. And once you adjust those, you will see what a difference it can make to a document, either color and or black and white. It's a great option to enable, and there's just many of the options. If you find that you'd like to turn them on or off, you just click the buttons and you'll see them shade out, or they'll enable by shading on. For your lines, you've got line thicknesses. So if you'll get really thin lines appearing in your scan document and you would like to increase the quality of those lines or remove the lines, then you can by all means adjust those threshold settings so that you at the end of the day not only get a good looking document but also a document that's going to be quite readable as far as the OCR engine. Speckle filter. That's in case you'll get tiny little speckles on your document due to a couple of things. If it's usually just noise, or it's physically dirty that needs the lenses clean. I recommend you clean your lenses on a regular basis so that you don't get speckles on your page. If you're scanning particular documents that require halftone removals where you've got photos on them, then you could do that. But normal black and white scanning that we do for BASs, we usually do not touch the halftone pictures because we're not capturing pictures, we're usually just capturing text. So they're all the different settings you can choose and adjust according to what you feel is going to work well for your batch class. There is also a driver settings scanner button, and that enables you to fully expose the manufacturer's own settings, and that'll give you more options over and above what you see here. So you can click on that and it will open up the manufacturer's own built-in drivers, which you can get to see things like auto cropping, auto deskewing, color correction and things like that. And as you see, currently the profile is default, but when I click OK after making those settings and come back to my scan module and close off that interface, and then make a save of my scanner profiles, what that will do is it will now also save the settings contained to the VRS option as well. So not only have I saved the default scanner settings, but also the VRS scanner settings as a profile. As you can see now that we've saved it and you load up the advanced button which shows the VRS interface, you've got a profile that matches, which is an F5 key, so you can press F5 at any time and it'll load up that profile when you're scanning. However, it will load automatically by default. One of the things we didn't touch on is under the driver settings, there's an ultrasonic option for detecting misfeeds. Please ensure that if you do have this available in your manufacturer's scanner, to enable to detect misfeeds by using ultrasonic sensors. So once we've made those changes and closed off the interface, the next thing we need to do for the first time is to also adjust what happens with Virtual Rescan when it detects an actual issue, how you want to work with it. Do you want it to interactively pop up and show you those challenged documents that you've scanned, or to totally ignore those? So the next thing is we do in the bottom corner, you'll see a little VRS icon. If you right mouse click on that, you've got some options, and we're going to look at the admin console and go through some of those options. So the preferences basically is the default, which is automatic for multi-core processing, and we don't really need to do anything in this particular part of the interface. What we're interested in is exceptions on, for example, when we get a brightness contrast out of range, and we can set that value and what to happen to the interface if you want to ignore it, or return an error, or just interactively pop up that VRS interface where the settings were done and show you the image so that you can adjust it. So you can adjust what you believe is something that you would accept for it to pass through. So Kofax VRS will do its best to fix all the images and give you the best optimum image possible, but if, for example, it's not able to do that, it allows you to interactively work with it or ignore it, so it's up to you. One of the things we do is with the out of paper option is that if you select return error, it basically stops the scanner and just waits for you to fill up the scanner and then press the scan button. However, if you decide to use the auto resolve option, then what that means is that the scanner will keep cycling. If you've got a sheet feed, it'll go up and down, and wait for you to fill up the hopper. So basically, if you've got a small hopper but thousands of pages to scan and you want to do it all at once, it'll keep asking for paper, and you just keep feeding the scanner until the job's complete. And then you can say, oh, I'm finished. However, I usually set it to return an error, which is not an error. It basically stops the scanner and waits for you to press scan again if you want to continue feeding up the hopper. All the rest of the options you can play with. So paper jam, what happens when you get a paper jam, what happens with the color if it's out, and so forth. And since we've already created one profile, you can see that the profile exists within the profile option. Everything else is about the same. There is an option to train Kofax VRS based on a batch class on what you believe is the optimum quality, and it will then learn. And also you have an option to check the actual physical scanner, if there's had a roller issue, if it needs to be replaced. It'll give you some sort of health check on your scanners. So that's what the administration console is. You set it up once. The other option we want to look at when we look at the VRS option is how do we want to allow the images or the VRS interface to work with us when we start scanning. So you have an option to say that you only want VRS to pop up when there are warnings. Or if you're testing it for the first time, you might want to just test the first page of a batch to make sure you haven't made any errors with your VRS settings. So every time you hit the scan button, the first page will pop up in the VRS interface, and then you'll be able to adjust it. Or if you're just testing and you're not sure, then use on every page. So every time you scan a page, if it's 5 pages, then the interface will pop up 5 times and show you each page. The default is on warnings. So if you've set your thresholds up to interact with you, then if it exceeds any of the thresholds, it'll pop up. If it doesn't exceed any thresholds, it will just fly through and adjust the images for you on the fly, so you won't have to deal with the interface. I suggest the first time you ever set it up that you check the on every page, as you're just testing your batches and your batch settings. So get a good sample set, test on every page, and then hopefully you'll find a happy medium that covers the batch class. If you decide that you don't want VRS to pop up at all, then you can of course choose the never option. It will still use VRS to auto-rotate, clean and everything else. However, it won't pop up with any warnings, messages or interact with the user. So this concludes how to set up the VRS settings. Since my scanner doesn't support virtual rescan, I'm unable to show the actual workings while it's in progress, but you'll see quite soon enough, if you are using virtual rescan, how it'll pop up when it exceeds the thresholds and how it will enable you to adjust all those settings on the fly, and how it will continue with scanning as soon as you close the VRS interface, and what a time saver that will be. Thank you.